Since the turn of the calendar year, the Knicks are 20-10. I actually wrote in the script, presumably 21-9 after this video goes up because it was supposed to go up right before the Hornets game and it got delayed. But then they lost to the Charlotte Hornets without LaMelo Ball. Now that's a bad game, obviously, but we're just gonna pretend that that didn't happen, okay? So let's just proceed. The Knicks are pretty freaking good, leading people to start asking this question. Are the New York Knicks contenders? Well, let's talk about it. So the easiest way to go about answering this question is just break down the team and then determine, are these individual things actually at a championship caliber level? So let's first talk about the defense, because that's where the Knicks have hung their hat in the past. Although they have been really inconsistent with it lately, they have finally been back to being a really good defense this year, again since the turn of the calendar year. How do they do this? Well, I do think this is the area where you can give Tom Thibodeau the most credit, because while there are some talented defenders on this team, there is of course RJ Barrett, and most underratedly so Immanuel Quickley, because he has taken a massive leap as a defender this year. Mitchell Robinson obviously brings his shot blocking to the table, although he does also bring his fouling along with it. But it really comes down to just the system that they run and the fact that there is zero tolerance from Tom Thibodeau for bullshitting on defense. If you're not playing defense, if you're not trying on defense, you're really not going to get away with it unless you're Julius Randle or Jalen Brunson, because they're bringing all-star level production on the offensive end. But we'll talk about that in a second. Also worth mentioning that a big part of this defensive rating swing has been Josh Hart, because he is one of the better perimeter defenders in the league. And just looking at the Knicks defense as a whole, while their individual defenders might not be the strongest core in the world, they are definitely more than capable of forming a quite impenetrable defense. Now, the offense is the thing that's always been shaky with the New York Knicks. As I previously mentioned, they have been third in offensive rating, which was pretty much shocking to anyone who would read that stat, because even New York Knicks fans will acknowledge that the system in which their offense is built is not exactly the strongest. And of course, Tom Thibodeau is not known historically for having particularly strong offenses. And relying upon Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, two of those three players being guys who are super duper inconsistent and have had their issues leading offenses in the past, it's not the most comfortable situation to be in. However, Jalen Brunson this year, since the turn of the calendar year, has been averaging 28 points per game. Julius Randle seemed to take the three-point shooting contest personally, because he's been lights out ever since the All-Star break. And he has been even better than his 2020 version of himself. So the offense there, I don't love that there's not a strong system. I don't love that they're a team that does not shoot the three ball particularly well. And I also don't love their lack of shot creators. Like, it's pretty much Julius, RJ, and Brunson, and RJ can be real wishy-washy. And of course, we saw in the playoffs with the Atlanta Hawks that Julius Randle's shot creating ability was pathetic in a playoff setting, and we'll talk about that potential risk towards the end. But offensively, while they have been really good lately, I will pretty much never feel like they're not on shaky ground. Luckily though, the addition of Jalen Brunson definitely brings that shaky ground to a higher floor. That doesn't work very well, but you get what I mean. Like, the offense is not going to be as bad as it was in the playoffs in that Hawks series, just pretty much inherently because of what Jalen Brunson brings to the table that wasn't there last time, obviously. Now, depth is an area that concerns me with this team, because how many players on this team are actually really going to be competent in a playoff rotation? On their bench, they have Immanuel Quickley and Josh Hart, which are two really strong bench pieces. But after that, it pretty much falls off of a cliff. And even when the playoffs come around, I don't know how much Quentin Grimes is going to be playing. I think Hart might be inserted into the starting lineup, and he'll certainly be playing more minutes than Grimes. So I don't love their depth situation, and that is definitely a concerning thing. And again, if we're just looking at their shot creation issues, I just realized I did not mention Immanuel Quickley among their shot creators. So I apologize for that. He can also do that. But just the lack of multiple shot creating threats. Evan Fournier is garbage at this point. I do worry about that and the lack of depth, really. There's just not, like, are we trusting Obi Toppin? I don't know that we are. And just looking at everybody else who's on that bench, I certainly don't trust them either. Now, coaching is a big factor here because Tom Thibodeau has a tendency to be stubborn and not really adjust the game plan when it is very obviously necessary to do so. That is something that we can really only hope is not the case. I will say in the case of that Hawks series last year, while I don't know that there was much that could be done to save losing the series, I also think that Tom just kind of said, yeah, this is our game plan, and if it's not going to work, then I guess it's not going to work, but we're not going to force it, you know? And that lack of willingness to adjust can really bite you in the ass and be the reason that you lose a series because, of course, this comes down to being a chess match, and if you're not even going to make a move, you're not going to win the chess match. I don't know anything about chess, so I assume that's true. So now let's get to the elephant that I just have been mentioning multiple times, so it's not even really an elephant in the room. How much do we trust Julius Randle? How much do we trust RJ Barrett? Both of them played bad in the playoffs against the Atlanta Hawks, but that was also their first time there, and the expectations were interesting going into that series, to say the least. So how much can we actually trust them? I'm not gonna give a great answer here. I'm not going to strongly suggest that they're going to be as bad as they were, because honestly, I think they were so bad that it'd be almost impossible to top it or to even be on that level of terrible. But at the same time, Julius Randle is a player who really relies on jump shots. This year, he is taking 8 3-pointers per game, which is either the best or worst timeline to live in basketball-wise, depending on who you ask. With that being the case, how reliable is that jumper going to be? Because, of course, in the playoffs, his 3-ball went in at like 33%, if I'm remembering correctly, but his mid-range shots did not drop whatsoever, and he was not getting into the paint, really, and unfortunately for Julius this year, he hasn't mitigated that issue of being really jump shot reliant. I do think the two-man game with him and Brunson could potentially free him up for easier looks than he's had in the past without that other creator out there. But at the end of the day, I don't necessarily trust this team all that well. It's definitely not ideal. That said, the question of are they contenders? I mean, their defense I trust to be good. Their offense has been good in the regular season, but I don't necessarily trust it to be. And I don't really trust Tom Thibodeau, and I don't really trust RJ Barrett, and I don't really trust Julius Randle. I think Jalen Brunson will be fine, but I don't know. I just don't really like anything else. I think IQ and Hart will show up and do what they need to do. But yeah, I'm not going to quite declare them contenders. I think that's being a little too liberal with that term. And yeah, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.